means that we only have your name. We cannot see you and we cannot hear you, but you can see and hear us when we're on screen. So don't worry if you've got anything crazy going on in the background, we won't know about it. This webinar is going to be recorded and we'll be posting it on the district's website under parent workshops. It usually takes me a couple of days to get it up there, but it'll be the whole video of the workshop. So if you've missed anything, there are a lot of resources that you're going to see. You'll be able to get them right off of the website. We're going to have plenty of time for questions and answers at the end. So we don't have a chat function in a webinar. We have what's called a Q&A. So if you would like to ask questions, we ask that you write them in the Q&A. A lot of times the questions are going to get answered through the course of the workshop. And so I may take the question down if I know it's been answered. I may answer you directly if it's something that's very specific to you. And otherwise, we'll hold them until the end and we'll have the experts go through them with us. So last thing, please don't raise your hand. That is one of the functions on the Zoom webinars, but we don't use it. So we use the Q&A instead. And I just want to thank you all so much for being here. I'm going to turn it back over to Michael from Daybreak.
Awesome. Thank you so much for all of that info on the logistics, Jake. And thank you again, everybody, for being here. We are really grateful to have you all here to discuss this really important topic. So tonight we are going to be talking about LGBTQ plus support for families and the ways that we can support our kids and their mental health. So in case you are just joining us, here are the instructions once more to join in and listen in Spanish. You can dial the phone number on the screen with the extension and access code, and these instructions are on each slide as well as we move forward. So a little bit of background about where we are joining from. Again, my name is Michael, and my colleague Brianna and I are joining from an organization called Daybreak Health. Daybreak provides mental health support that is designed for youth. Our goal is to create a world where every young person has access to the mental health supports that they need. And we are really grateful to all of you for being here today and to Simi Valley for joining us in that mission and helping support the kids in our lives. And now I'm going to turn it over to Brianna to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brianna Skanderup, and I'm one of the therapists that work directly with our youth and their families. I am also Daybreak's classes specialist, so I partner with Michael on all of our classes. Thank you for taking the time out of your precious day to be here tonight. I hope to see you again at future classes through your district.
Awesome. And my name is Michael. I'm the manager of virtual classes here at Daybreak, which means that I help to facilitate and to organize these classes. My background is in visual arts and psychology, and I have led a ton of workshops on mental health with a variety of populations. I also work as a digital crisis counselor for a youth suicide prevention hotline, specifically one that is actually aimed at supporting LGBTQ youth. So really looking forward to having this conversation today. So to just go over what we'll be talking about, we are going to begin with going over some terms and definitions. We'll talk about child, gender, and sexual identity development. We'll think about ways that times when your children might need more support. We'll talk about some actionable strategies and ways that you can help support your children, and then we'll share some resources. But with this class, we wanted to start off with just some definitions, some LGBTQ plus 101. It can be really challenging to know how to handle when a child comes out as LGBTQ plus. Even for those of us who have friends and family who are part of the LGBTQ community, it's definitely completely new territory when it's someone, in your direct family, when it's your child. And there's a lot of factors at play, personal values, worries for their future, lack of knowledge, whatever it may be. But although there will definitely be some stumbles and some learning that needs to be done, it is definitely a journey that we can take together, and that you can definitely support your children on. Staying connected and working through these things as a family is going to be hugely helpful for your child. And so let's get started talking about some ways to do so. So one of the things that people often, I hear often, are that there are a lot of different terms, and people don't know when to use the right word or what to say in certain situations. So we wanted to talk about just defining some of these terms to get us started. And I want to caveat this with, there are a lot of terms, and it is completely okay if you don't remember all of them right away. None of us are perfect. We're all learning. We're all continuing to grow. So I know we're going to share a lot tonight, and I don't want you to feel like, this is a test or that you have to memorize all of these. Just really grateful that you're here, and that if this is the first time you're hearing some of these, that you're on this journey with us. So the LGBTQ acronym, the first stands for lesbian, which is a woman who is primarily attracted to women. G for gay, which is a man primarily attracted to men. Sometimes it is used more broadly to identify all individuals who are attracted to the same gender. Bisexual is a term that means an individual attracted to people of their own gender and different genders. Transgender or trans is a person whose gender identity differs from their assigned sex at birth. And we'll look at that a little bit more on the next slide. Queer is a word that sometimes people have trouble with. It is used as an inclusive term for anyone whose sexual orientation is not strictly heterosexual. At times it has been used as a slur. It has been reclaimed by a lot of the queer community. And people feel like it is a little bit more encompassing of all different types of identities. So for a lot of people, it's a really affirming term. Some people still have a little bit of trouble with it, but it is a term that has gained some widespread popularity. Often, sometimes under that plus, you will also see additional letters. For example, you might see I, which will stand for a person whose sexual anatomy or chromosomes do not fit within the traditional markers of male or female. Some folks also use the Q to mean questioning, which is a person who is in the process of exploring their sexual orientation or gender identity. Asexual is a person who generally does not feel sexual attraction or desire towards any group of people. Pansexual is one that is a term that is gaining in popularity as people start to identify with this more. It is a person who experiences attraction to others regardless of their sex or gender. And then getting into gender dysphoria. This is a term that generally applies to transgender people. Not all transgender people experience gender dysphoria, but it is a clinically significant distress when a person's assigned birth gender is not the same as the one with which they identify. So often, or sometimes when people are transitioning, they might experience something called gender dysphoria. And then cisgender is a term that is used to identify people who their gender identity aligns with the sex that they were assigned at birth. Like I said, this is a lot of terms, and it is definitely okay if, this is the first time you're hearing some or you don't remember. You will get, access to this recording, but we just wanted to set up some of these terms for the rest of the session that we'll be referencing a few of these.
And then when describing sex, this is a physical attribute. So assigned at birth, typically by a doctor, midwife, and it's used to describe a child at birth based on their external anatomy. And then with gender, once sex is assigned, we tend to presume a child's gender. So this involves an interrelationship between behavioral, cultural, and psychological traits. And the idea of gender is typically associated with one's sex. So such as traditional or non-traditional gender roles or relating to being feminine, masculine, etc. With our gender identity, this refers to our internal sense of being female, male, both of those, neither of those. The names we use to convey our gender are based on our deeply held internal sense of self. And then with gender expression, this refers to how we present our gender in the world, physically and behaviorally. And then with pronouns, these are part of someone's gender expression, and people can have multiple sets of pronouns for themselves, such as using he, him, and his, and they, them, theirs. A gender neutral or gender inclusive pronoun is a pronoun which doesn't associate with a gender with the individual being discussed, such as they, them.
Mhm. And I always love to share the gender unicorn. It is an interesting way to look at the fact that gender identity, gender expression, sex assigned at birth, who you're physically attracted to and who you're emotionally attracted to are all independent of each other. And everybody experiences all of these attributes differently. And the purpose of this is actually really fun. And if you are parenting a child on the LGBTQ plus, in the LGBTQ plus community, this could be a fun activity to do with them, where you can print out a copy of the gender unicorn. We will share this, a link to this, and place yourself on where you fall on the spectrum. So, you know, how much you feel physically attracted to men, women, or other genders, how much you feel emotionally attracted to, and try to identify try to use that as a tool to figure out how your gender and your sexuality interact. I would recommend using this with older teens who are already experiencing or communicating that they are experiencing or questioning their gender or experiencing their gender, but you can use this with kids of any age. So moving forward, we wanted to talk about some myths that you might hear about the LGBTQ plus community. And these are all related to, we wanted to keep the focus of this today on mental health and how the impacts of growing up LGBTQ might impact mental health. So one that we commonly hear is homosexuality is a choice, and scientific data has indicated that sexual orientation, whether it's homosexuality, heterosexuality, is biologically based. There's definitely still a lot to learn, but from the studies that we have, it suggests that it is a combination of genetics, like our DNA, and epigenetics, so external factors in the environment that occur in our brains and in our bodies that lead to our sexual attraction and sexual identity. Homosexuality can be cured is another myth that we sometimes hear, and the American Psychological Association has reviewed years of research on therapeutic efforts determined to change somebody's sexual orientation, and found that it is highly unlikely to be able to be changed. A lot of the leading organizations such as the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Medical Association, the American Psychiatric Association, all agree that homosexuality is not something that needs to be cured, and that it is very unlikely to be able to change it through something such as reparative or different types of conversion therapy. We also hear sometimes that homosexuality is a mental health disorder, and this comes from the fact that quite some years ago, it was listed in medical books as being a disorder, but since 1973, it has been removed from being a disorder. And the American Psychiatric Association, the American Psychological Association, and the American Academy of Pediatrics issued a statement saying homosexuality is not an illness, it does not require treatment, and it is not changeable. Gender differences are normal expressions of human relationships. So wanted to share a little bit of, what you might hear, we might be hearing out in the world, and what some of the reality of that actually is. Similarly, in terms of gender, sometimes we think that children are too young to know their gender. When we look at when we start to develop a sense of gender and our gender expression, around age 2, studies have found that children become conscious of the physical differences between boys and girls. Before their 3rd birthday, most can easily label themselves as either a boy or a girl. And by age 4, most children have a stable sense of their gender identity. So it is something that seems to be inherent in a person's genetic makeup and is starts to develop when kids are developing their gender identity. And lastly, being transgender or non-binary is a sign of mental illness. This is also a myth. Research indicates that gender diverse youth who have parental support and are affirmed in their gender identity have similar health profiles as their cisgender or straight peers.
All right, and then we want to go ahead and share some figures with you all as well. And so the Trevor Project's 2022 National Survey is one of the most diverse surveys of the LGBTQ plus youth community ever conducted. And it captures the experience of nearly 34,000 LGBTQ plus youth ages between 13 and 24 within the United States. And we want to touch on some of the great and unique stressors that our LGBTQ kiddos face, including, so 36% of respondents reported having been physically threatened or harmed in some way due to their sexual orientation or gender identity. 73% of respondents report experiencing discrimination as a result of their sexual orientation, gender identity in their lifetime. And then 17% of respondents being faced with threats or actual experiences in conversion therapy. And then looking more directly at mental health concerns involving suicide, 45% of respondents having seriously considered attempting suicide within the past year, 14% making actual attempts. And involving anxiety and depression, 73% of youth having symptoms related to anxiety, 58% of youth having experienced symptoms of depression, and 60% of youth reporting wanting access to mental health support and were unfortunately not able to connect to these resources.
And when we look at the stressors that youth are facing these days, it's important to understand that LGBTQ plus youth are experiencing all of the same stressors that their straight and cisgender peers are experiencing. And they also have these added stressors that come from growing up in a world that doesn't necessarily accept them. The Human Rights Campaign did a study called Growing Up LGBTQ in America, and they looked at LGBTQ youth and non-LGBTQ youth and identified what are the top things that they're worried about. What are they most stressed about in their lives? And they found that non-LGBTQ youth if they were asked to describe one thing to change in their life, it would be money or their appearance or improving their mental health. Whereas LGBTQ youth listed understanding, tolerance, they would increase understanding or tolerance or hate. They would change their parent or family situation. They would change where they live or where they grew up. Non-LGBTQ youth noted that they were worried about classes, college, and financial pressures as their top three most important problems. And LGBTQ youth identified non-accepting families, bullying, and fear of being out or open. And so we share this just to give an example of, what we're looking at on the last slide of all of these higher rates of anxiety or depression. And we want to share some of the worries and the challenges that are facing LGBTQ plus youth.
And we're going to take a little bit of a closer look on some of these more common issues that we were just talking about. So the condition of depression, this involves an intense and persistent state of being, of sadness, of beyond being temporarily blue or just sad in the normal response to a stressor in front of us. It's something that we can't just snap out of, often lasting weeks, months, or years. Where the person may experience just intense sadness or irritability, numbness, or intense loss of pleasure or interest in meaningful activities. One will also likely experience impairments in their functioning in important life domains. So this can include within their relationships, within their academics or school functioning, daily routines or work. Signs of depression that we may notice in our own kiddos can include statements of hopelessness, statements of intense sadness, anger, quick or intense mood fluctuations, statements of low self-esteem or negative core beliefs about themselves, negative thinking about themselves or other people's intentions, increased sensitivity and reactivity to comments from other people or situations. Withdrawal from activities, low motivation, isolating themselves, slowing down of movements, not moving for hours, low energy, or the opposite, feeling very fidgety or on edge, not really being able to settle, difficulty maintaining hygiene practices. This is where those daily routines can come into play. When we're depressed, it can be hard to get out of bed, to brush our teeth, go make ourselves something to eat, change our clothes. Things that we often take for granted as normal parts of our day can feel very hard. And then anxiety involves our reactions to internal and external stressors, such as our thoughts, other people, worrying, fear, stress, and just other kinds of things that cause these kinds of feelings in us. And anxiety is often future focused. Anxiety can be helpful sometimes. We need this feeling just like all of our feelings. And then often it can get too big and become persistent and intrusive, overwhelming. And just it feels like it won't let up. It won't go away. It's going to last forever. And some signs and symptoms we may notice can include changes in appetite, not being hungry, not being able to sleep, physical reactions or pains, headaches, body pains, stomach issues, stomach aches, frequent trips to the nurse's office at school and complaining of feeling sick and wanting to go home, avoidance of people or certain classes or places that bring on the anxiety, procrastination, intense low motivation, declining grades or skipping classes, not doing homework, refusing to go to school, those kinds of things.
And I do want to note that we are discussing these different anxiety and depression and some signs and symptoms to look out for simply or because, as we noted before, LGBTQ youth are showing higher rates of experiencing these. That is not to say that only LGBTQ plus youth experience these or that all LGBTQ plus youth will experience these. But we are just finding that LGBTQ youth do have higher rates. And so we wanted to talk about what some of these signs and symptoms might look like if you are parenting an LGBTQ plus youth child.
Very important note, Michael. Thank you. These are also very consistent with the reports of commonly experienced things that we noted on the Trevor Project surveying as well. So now looking at suicidal ideation, this can be active or passive. Both experiences are 100% valid and should always be taken seriously. It may not progress past having thoughts of not wanting to be alive or not wanting to wake up, or it may progress to more serious actions, such as planning to end our life in a certain way or on a certain day, or actually making an attempt to end our life. And if your child is deeply suffering and feeling suicidal, things that you may notice can include some verbal statements of not wanting to wake up, wanting this to end, this feels unbearable, writing or posting about dying or suicide, looking at ways that they could kill themselves or ways that other people have successfully made suicide attempts, harming themselves in other ways, visiting or calling other people to say goodbye, withdrawing from activities they have enjoyed, giving away their possessions, showing rage or talking about seeking revenge on other people, increased substance use as well.
So when, like we mentioned, of course, these are things that might affect everybody, but those are some warning signs that you can look out to for if you are parenting an LGBTQ plus child. We also wanted to talk about some of the different stages of coming out. If you are parenting a child who is in the process of coming out, it can be really helpful to have an awareness of what they might be going through. So studies have found that different phases of coming out include starting with self-discovery. So this is that personal internal process of discovering and coming to terms with one's sexuality or gender identity. Usually it's done in private, and it can be a really challenging time for some people. It can be something that, you know, we try to deny within ourselves or try to overcome in some way, usually very personal. It normally begins with sharing with a close friend or family member. It is not always the parents that children go to first, and that's totally okay. You know, we want to be the person who can be there for our kids, but sometimes the best thing we can do is help them find safe adults to talk to, where they do feel comfortable sharing, even if it's not us. But this is an important one because acceptance during these early stages of disclosure can lead to much greater senses of self-esteem, self-acceptance, self-confidence, and rejection can send somebody back to that first phase of, you know, back into the closet, as they say, where they're trying to figure out their identity on their own and keeping it private. Next up comes socialization, so finding connection and community, learning more about their identity, which leads to hopefully positive self-identification, realizing that their attraction is normal and healthy and starting to feel, you know, okay with who they are, which leads to their integration and acceptance. Often, you know, some people are very open about their identity and their sexuality. Some people are more quietly open, and there's no right or wrong way to do this. But what we want to do is make sure that we're helping our kids get to this place, and helping them overcome, you know, some of those more difficult early stages. And it is a lifelong journey. You know, in our society, we often assume that everyone is heterosexual, and LGBTQ people, and especially youth, do often have to come out multiple times, and it can be really challenging. And so being supportive through that process is a huge way that you can support your kids.
And then as our children go through their own stages, parents, it's also totally normal that we go through our own stages of acceptance as well, as there are changes in the family and our children are sharing with us. So with denial, we may wonder how this can be happening. Our parents may hope that this is a phase, an act of rebelliousness, or an experiment, for example. When looking at grief, this is a normal human response, you know, to grieve things that could have been, or feel a sense of loss when we're facing some kind of change. And we may grieve the loss of the child that we knew, or a future that we hoped for them, and just for ourselves. And as that starts to look different, you know, our feelings of loss may come up too. With blame and guilt, parents may feel a need to find a reason for why things are changing. And this can lead to guilt for feeling that way or looking for blame, questioning if we did something, blaming our children for changing or their partners or their friends, etc. With fear, this is another common emotion really closely connected to the unknown, and fear of being judged by others, not knowing what to expect next, maybe fear of losing important people in our communities, fear of our children's well-being and their safety. With anger, we feel anger at ourselves sometimes, or we may feel anger at a God or at our child or other people in our lives for many different reasons. And while our internal emotions are so valid, because they're ours, just like our children's internal emotions are valid as well, it's also really important to find ways to deal with our own anger and not direct that towards our child as we go through our process. And then with self-realization, this involves coming to the realization that it's not our child who needs to change, but the family unit, and to kind of recreate the image that we had of our family to be more inclusive and to kind of represent our new reality as a family and our child's identity or whatever they're sharing with us. And just take steps to surround yourself with the support that you need during this process. And then with acceptance, this can involve, just loving and accepting your wonderful, unique, and special child for who they are, just as they are, the way that you always have. And it can also be very normal to go back and forth through some of these stages as we're kind of learning and discovering new things as well.
Brianna and Michael, if I can interrupt for a quick moment, we had one of our participants is raising their hand. They may have come in after I was talking about it. We can't answer a raised hand, but we can answer in the Q&A if you want to put your question there. Some of the questions I'm holding till the end so that we can ask them within the group. Some of them are getting answered on the spot. So if yours hasn't been answered, we're not ignoring it. I'm just holding it so other people can benefit from the answer. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And I know we've shared a lot of really heavy information today. We have definitely looked at, some of the more challenging aspects or some of the struggles, because we really wanted to talk about what your children might be experiencing with their mental health. Again, that is not to say that all LGBTQ youth will experience this. And there's lots of joy to be found in queer communities. But we wanted to talk about that, but I want to know that there is hope as well. So looking back at that project survey from 2022, they found that youth who felt high social support from their family reported attempting suicide at less than half of the rate of those who felt low or only moderate support. So it decreases the likelihood of a suicide attempt to be accepted by your family. They also found that feeling acceptance at school is associated with lower rates of suicide attempts as well. And 89% of LGBTQ youth reported that seeing LGBTQ representation in TV or movies helped them to feel good about their identity as well. So there are ways that we can help support our kids and help make sure that they don't experience or lessen some of the challenges that they might face. And so we want to talk about some of those strategies now.
And so ways that parents can be supportive and help and benefit their children's mental health. Just letting your children know how much you love them unconditionally, that if they're going through something and sharing something new with you about how they're feeling or just changes that they're noticing, letting them know concretely that your love and appreciation for them is not contingent on them fitting into a specific box, and expressing appreciation that they shared with you. It is huge that you have earned the trust of your child. That is not something that we should take for granted. And expressing that verbally can go a very long way to make sure that they continue to come to us and share. And then continue talking to them, listening to them, and learning as well, not just from them, but taking the initiative to go on our own and learn so we can also be a support to them and we can support ourselves. Like all of you joining this class, this is a huge step in supporting your children. Not jumping to conclusions or making assumptions based on our own beliefs or judgments. Validating and helping them learn about their identities. This might be a new process for them as well, and we can learn alongside them and be supportive in that way. We can help expose our children to diverse media, including diverse family structures, maybe where there are 2 moms and 2 dads, or men and women in non-stereotypical diverse gender roles, like stay-at-home dads and working moms, for example. Standing up and advocating for our children. We can do this in so many settings, within our family, within our community, at their schools, within the medical system. Getting to know their friends. This is a huge protective factor for all teenagers. Getting to know their friends, welcoming their friends into your home, or to be part of special events for your children as well. And this is going to also show acceptance of who they're choosing to be and who they're choosing to be around. And then connecting them to professional resources if that's something that's appropriate for them, if they would like to and they're open to it, can be very supportive. And then maintaining normal routines, consistency, normal structure and rules at home. Again, this is another protective factor that is huge for all teenagers. Having predictability and routine in our life is very supportive of our mental health. And then supporting siblings to get on board and understand the changes that are going on at home or with your child. Again, respecting their confidentiality. It's huge that your child is coming to you and sharing something so big, and you've done something very special to earn that trust. Breaking that confidentiality can even be like sharing with their other parent, for example. Our children will come and share with each of us or with people as they feel comfortable doing so, of course, unless they're asking for support in sharing and opening up to other people. And then just really holding that hope with your child and helping them understand that they're going to have a normal, happy future. Transitions and changes can be difficult for anyone in any setting, in any family. But with family support and using coping skills and these protective factors that we're talking about, everyone can be resilient and support each other through them. And this can also be a very happy, joyous time in your child's life.
And like Brianna mentioned earlier, of course, this doesn't just impact the child. It doesn't just impact the LGBTQ plus person. It is totally valid that you will have feelings, that your other children may have feelings, and that's totally okay. This is a journey that we are all going to be on together. But it is important to remember, especially when working with teenagers who are maybe coming out for the first time or still figuring out how to talk about their identity, how to feel comfortable in it, that they need you to be the adult, and they need you to be there to support them as they go through that. So the parent role is finding your own path, keeping your balance, helping your child, and if you have any other children, and keeping up that support. And then the child's role is learning how to positively live with their new identity, face new challenges that they might be encountering, and doing that with the parent's support. And so managing your own emotions is going to be really, really important as you work on supporting your children. Finding support for yourself is a huge one. Again, like Brianna mentioned, can get tricky when you want to make sure that you're respecting your child's confidentiality and where they are in their coming out process. But if you talk to them about it, if it's something that's okay, definitely joining a support group or looking online for support groups. We have a couple that we'll share in the resources at the end. Confiding in someone that you trust, practicing self-care like writing or seeking your own counseling are all ways that you can help manage your own emotions. Educating yourself, huge pat on the back to all of you for being here today to learn more. Learning more about your child's identity is going to help reduce fear and worry. It's going to help you support them better and give you ways that you can connect with them. And the last piece of managing your own emotions is remembering to be gentle with yourself. This journey may be as new for you as it is for your child. And we're, like we mentioned, none of us are perfect. We're all going to make mistakes. We're not going to get it right the first time. But if you're trying your best, and if you're coming from a place of love, your child will see that and they'll appreciate that. And hopefully that will help to build up that connection and build up the support that you're able to give them.
And then as we build this communication, trust, and talking foundation with our children, which is going to be one of our top priorities with all of our children, right? This is going to open the door for when we have more difficult or awkward conversations, which is almost an inevitable part of having teenagers, you know? It actually has been shown that having these more difficult and awkward conversations really helps strengthen the parent-child relationship and the communication. But that's not isolated, right? We need to really build in these daily habits of connecting about anything with our children, because it's going to be a little bit more difficult, or maybe not as smooth potentially, to have these more awkward or difficult conversations if we're not really used to checking in about everyday things. And once that foundation is there and parents and their kids are more comfortable broaching these heavier topics, it can really be beneficial for future issues as well. Some risky behaviors have been shown to be prevented or decreased by parents being able to have these conversations with children, and children feeling safe coming to their parents, as opposed to avoiding having these conversations and fearing of getting in trouble. So for example, according to the CDC, teens report that their parents have the greatest influence over their decisions about topics such as sex and substance use, more than friends, siblings, and media. So they really value your guys' opinions and they want to come to you guys, but it also has to be mutual in the sense that, of course, every family has their rules, every family has their consequences for certain things, but we don't want to approach every topic or every mistake with punitively. And then when we're getting ready to have these difficult conversations, we really want to be clear. We want to be specific. We want to focus on what we're talking about in the moment and not jump around from topic to topic, and explain our opinion, and also be open to hearing our child's opinion. We don't always have to understand that, but if we welcome them to share with us, that's already half the battle. And then, taking time and space to cool off if necessary. These conversations can sometimes go a little awry. We don't have to finish conversations in the moment. They don't have to get wrapped up in that exact moment. We can take space, come back to it. If your child shares something with you that you weren't expecting, it is totally okay to say something like, wow, I'm trying to process a little bit of what you're telling me. I think I need to take a little bit of time just to, kind of digest and figure out how I want to respond. I don't want to say anything I don't mean, and I want to, be mindful and have a thoughtful response for you. So I just need a little bit of time. It is okay to say that, and then come back to a conversation when you're feeling ready to do so. And then, if something already happened, or you're talking about how you guys can better something, for your child or within the family, discuss your observations and what you would like to see change, offer solutions that you think would be a good idea. And when we can collaborate with our children on solutions, they're going to be so much more responsive to them too. So also welcoming their ideas, and we can kind of collaborate sometimes with our teens. And then if you are worried about your child's safety or suicidality, there are a lot of resources. You guys aren't on your own. There are resources online, for example, where you can go step by step in creating a safety plan. Even if your child is not feeling suicidal, but they're going through something that's a little bit difficult, you can still create a safety plan just to get kind of on paper, help them clarify, what are my warning signs? How do I know when I'm in that place? What are some things that help me? What are some coping skills that I can write down on the safety plan or coping plan that help me when I'm feeling X, Y, Z? What are some positive distractions for me? Who are my support people? Where are my support sites, websites, or where can I go at school when I'm feeling this way? And kind of helping them organize that information. figuring out if they want to connect with professional support in some way. And then just figuring out how to make the environment safer for everybody. If there are heavy prescription medications around the house, maybe keeping those in the medicine cabinet in your bathroom or something, somewhere where knowing what's in the house, keeping an inventory if there are any weapons in the house, those kinds of things, just kind of making environments safer at home in general can be very supportive as well.
And we wanted to make sure that we talk about prioritizing time for self-care. Self-care is a really big protective factor. By having coping skills and self-care in place, it can make sure that we are more prepared when we encounter challenging situations in our lives. And it's something that you can do together as a family. Doing self-care together as a family not only helps model for kids that it's important for them to take care of themselves, take care of their mental health, but it also provides those opportunities for you to have those conversations, have those connections, build that bond that will allow you to have the more difficult conversations as well. So some ways, just ideas. Self-care doesn't have to be a big fancy thing. It doesn't have to be, spa days, although it definitely can be. But it can look like just, having a picnic outside or going for a bike ride, going for a walk together, learning something new together, like a dance or reading together, creating a cozy spot at home to wind down at the end of the day, and prioritizing connection. So maybe every day setting up a routine where you ask about the peak of the day and the pit of the day, something really good that happened and something that wasn't so good. Or a 30-day self-care challenge where you take a calendar and everybody gets to pick, okay, we're going to do 30 days of self-care. I'll pick these days, you pick these days, and empower your kids to be able to have a choice in the way that you spend time together. This is for all teens. It's going to be a really helpful way of building those connections, modeling self-care, and making sure that you're spending that time together. And now we wanted to share some resources if you are looking for further support. I know this is a really big topic. There's a lot to learn and a lot that, only so much that we could cover tonight. So we wanted to make sure that if you're looking for any further information, that you have access to that. So some organizations and resources are the Trevor Project, which also has suicide prevention hotlines for LGBTQ youth. PFLAG is for parents, families, and friends of lesbians and gays. The Family Acceptance Project, there's an organization called Mama Bears, which is parents of LGBTQ plus youth. And we will be sure to send, or I'll ask Jake if we can send these out afterwards as part of the follow-up for this class. But there's also gender spectrum and trans students education resources. There are also a lot of really wonderful faith-based LGBTQ plus resources that can dive more specifically into issues of faith and reconciling that in your relationship with your child as well. And now Jake, or I'm not sure if somebody from Simi Valley wants to talk through some of the school resources that are available.
Include our counselors as well. And just real quickly, Michael, I will be posting the resources, the links on the website when I post the recording of the webinar. So
Awesome.
A couple of people are asking, but I had already intended to do that. So
awesome. Thank you for that.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you all for being here. It's very important, and it shows such a dedication to all our students to ensuring that they all feel safe and welcome and included in our schools. So this website you'll see is mostly put on by our counselors. We are regularly trying to vet and making sure we're getting our students the best resources. And this, you could get to it from our district website. I don't know if any of the counselors wanted to speak on anything specific.
I'll just say that there's if you want to see who the counselor is at your student's school, you can check on that website. There's elementary counselors, and we share school sites. And then there's also information on the high school and middle school counselors.
So I think you were just trying to express like district resources. And I think another thing that I have shared with parents is our local Ventura County Rainbow Umbrella. And I think that's a really great resource locally for our families here, where they can actually get connected to some of those support groups that you have referenced before. So that's something I wanted to note as well.
We have one question in the Q&A that I held back from the beginning because I thought it was a good question for parents. The question is, how are we defining attracted to?
Mhm.
This comes from the beginning when we were defining different terms.
Yeah, I would say that, looking at attracted, the word attracted, generally it can mean emotionally or romantically attracted as well as physically attracted. And so some LGBTQ people may find that they are emotionally attracted to people of one gender, but physically attracted to people of another gender. And that's where some of that, like the gender unicorn can be helpful in having those conversations or thinking about how those forms of attraction play out differently for each person.
And then just one more thing to add is that at our secondary schools, we do have clubs that are pride clubs or safe spaces that students can drop in, or, there's another adult there where students can also meet other kids that are LGBTQ plus or exploring that identity. So that's another resource for students on campus.
Amazing. It sounds like there are a lot of really cool resources, which is awesome to hear.
Somebody has asked if parents can volunteer for campus support.
So I think at each campus that looks different. I would suggest that you reach out to your school principal to find out exactly what that school's policies are. Especially because, I'm a middle school counselor, and that's going to look very different than at one of our local high schools. So your principal would be the best line for an answer specific to your child's school. But I think it's really wonderful you're willing to. I think your child would be very, very grateful and could feel extremely supported by that. So please reach out and ask, and maybe even suggest an idea of what that looks like to you when you say to support. Does that mean you want to come visit the club? Does that mean you want to run some sort of informational table at an event? I think that if you present what that looks like in your mind to the principal, you're going to be able to get a much clearer answer.
Mm.
Somebody has thanked us, so you're welcome. One of the things that I wanted to put out there is we believe to our core as educators and as people working with children that every child that comes to us is important and valued. And this is part of that. We have every child that comes to us. We have many differences in our district, and it makes our district a much more wonderful, diverse place to be in. So our mission is to have every child feel important because they are to us. So for that, I appreciate all the work that's being done here tonight, and for the parents that are participating. We have somebody that's asking, it's an interesting question. Do we find that more students identify as LGBTQ plus just to be part of a group, since it's more acceptable now to identify as LGBTQ plus?
I think at the middle school, we can relate to that. And I don't think it's necessarily that I think it's a dangerous line to question it. But but it's okay to open the conversation. What do you mean by that? Rather than, no, that's not what you are. I don't believe you, right? What, like, I would say take the exploratory route more than anything. And also support your child in research within that route. So, hey, as a family, or you and me, let's go look at this together, and what that means, or let's go visit this support group together so that you can see I'm supporting you, but that maybe I feel like we both need to know a little bit more about what you're actually saying.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the most important thing is that we show our kids that we love them and support them. I kind of liken it to, you know, maybe this student or this child is thinking like, I want to be like, for me, when I was in middle school, junior high, I wanted to be a lawyer. I ended up becoming a teacher. So, you know, it's just where they're at and just supporting and loving them. And I loved your response, Anna. So it's spot on.
Yeah. I also, I want to add on to that too, that I think the most important part of that question was the part where it said it's now more acceptable to identify. And, you know, we'll never know how many people throughout history were not able to come out or not able to live truly or freely because of where they lived, or, you know, it wasn't safe, or they just didn't feel comfortable. But I think it is something that is worth really celebrating, that it is more acceptable and kids do feel more comfortable, you know, sharing with their parents and being who they truly are. And so I just wanted to note that as well, that it might be because now we are in a more inclusive environment, and, you know, thanking all of you for being here and being part of building that inclusive environment and supporting our kids in that way, to live, you know, their truth in that way.
So in terms of, another question came through, how much do we spend? We don't necessarily spend on LGBTQ plus resources. We do invest in, you know, our school counselors, resources that our schools use, but that's for all our students. It's not necessarily specific to LGBTQ plus resources. I don't know if anybody else wants to speak to that.
As I answered before, this is the second time the question came up, and I am not being snarky. We don't have a line item in the budget for LGBTQ. They are our students. We have a budget for our students, and whatever the needs are, we're going to address them. And it's not as if we put 10% of the budget to them, or we put $50 to them. It's whatever the needs are. Our programs are dynamic and they absorb the needs of all the children, not just LGBTQ plus kids.
And I just would want to chime in. We receive the same amount of money for all of our general education students, and we develop programs that meet the needs of all of our students. So, you know, no one group is singled out. So we want to provide services just like this service that we have tonight for our students and our parents, and just want to make sure all of our students are safe and healthy and learning about life and about the core subjects.
We are at 8 o'clock and it seems like the questions have calmed down. Is there anything anybody would like to say to close us out?
I want to say thank you so much again to all of you for being here. It is certainly, you know, a very big topic. We could have a whole series on this, and but really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be here. And I hope you give yourselves a pat on the back for making the time, for putting yourself out there to learn more and find better ways to continue supporting and loving your children. I'm sure that is felt and appreciated. And I feel really grateful to have had the opportunity to be here with you all tonight. So thank you for, thanks for being here and being part of this conversation.
Yes, and we really hope that you guys are able to join us again as we continue to partner with Simi Valley and bring you guys other topics that might be relevant into supporting your kids.
Yes, our next class will be understanding changes in your child's behavior. That will be on Wednesday, March 8th. And we will discuss developmentally typical and concerning childhood behaviors, stressors and risk factors, and ways to support your children through potential behavior changes. So we hope to see you there.
Thank you, everybody.